How many of you are like me and you wake up each morning and one of the first people that you see is the person in the mirror? Would you hold up your hand? Is that correct? And as you look at that person, the person begins to ask you questions like, how are you doing today? What are your plans for today? What problems are you prepared to solve? What kind of decisions have you prepared yourself to make? To what extent will you create value for other people today? Let's talk about that. And then maybe the last question is, when you look into your future, what do you see? What do you see? And all of us answer those questions, don't we? Not consciously, but one way or another we answer those questions. Because on the very core within us, there's a thing that we call an inner sense of worthiness. And that inner sense of worthiness defines to me how worthy I think I am and what I deserve to have in the way of life rewards. And that paradigm, that emotional paradigm, belief boundary that's within us, may be true or false. And my opinion is, as I have listened to thousands and thousands of people share their lives, that most people, the paradigm that they have is not a true paradigm. It's a limiting one. And so we go through life and we have experiences. People tell us things about ourselves. We look at our parents. Did we see love manifest between two parents? Did we feel loved by parents? To what extent did our parents help us understand how to have hope in our lives? How to have expectations of achievement, expectations of what we can discover within ourselves and how we can actualize it. And I think we would all say that we would all be different in this regard. Well, I'd like you to take those thoughts, if you would, just kind of package them and put them up on a peg here for just a moment. And let me share with you another thought we're going to put on the second peg. And then we're going to see what all that means, hopefully. And the second peg is some research that I have recently seen in UCLA, and I'm going to paraphrase it, says that every thought that we think creates a brain pattern. And they actually took brain pictures of that. They took one of my head and they found nothing. Old joke. Thank you, Walt, for laughing. They say that each thought I think, each choice I make, each decision I make immediately creates a brain pattern. And this brain pattern ushers in an emotion, a corresponding emotion. So if the brain pattern is positive or negative, it creates an emotion that's positive or negative, fear or confidence, hope or dismay. And then to go on with the point here, whatever this emotion is, it triggers a behavior. And the behavior brings our life together. It becomes what we achieve. It becomes our life, who we are and what we do and how we do it. And so much of our teaching is all about working on the effect instead of working on the cause, isn't it? Because one thing, we've all heard the cheap, plastic, positive thinking things. And the more educated we are, the more we tend to reject that because it's unsophisticated and not like me. Well, this research that we each think thoughts or make decisions or have choices that create a brain pattern, that create an emotion, that drive a behavior. let's peg that on this second peg for a moment. And let me share with you a couple of experiences that I've had that maybe we can see those things running through them. You won't believe this, but I'm not a young person. I'm an old person. I began a training and development course 52 years ago. And I was old then, so why would I be young now? And so we've had a lot of people. We've had courses in about 130 nations now. We've had somewhere north of 1.5 million people in these courses. We've had courses for all kinds of people. And we find that most all people are alike in 2 or 3 ways that I've just described. One of the most enjoyable things in my career is for 9 years I worked with a college football team. It was a Division II school, not that everyone in the world had heard about, but we won 2 national championships in these 9 years. One year in one game, we had 2 kids in the same game set world records. One kid kicked a field goal, 69 yards, for a world record that still holds today, and that's been 40 years ago that he did it. The other kid had scored more touchdowns in his 4-year college career than anyone had ever done in any college or university before that. Lido Mitchell of Penn State held the record before that. And so something was happening to these kids. And what we were able to do is to bring them together, and between the 3rd and 4th week, we begin to see a bonding take place. They begin to connect and come together. One of the kids in the very first course I conducted, I'll never forget him. His name was Bob Oliver. Bob Oliver was a pretty big guy. He played defensive end, and he was not having a good year. He was a senior, and at the beginning of the year, he had some problems. He'd been hurt a little bit, and he couldn't go full speed. And then when he got to where he could play mostly full speed, he was in a game, and near the end of the game, his team was ahead 7 points. And the other team got the ball, and they had just a minute or two, and they kicked off, and they were down with about the 30-yard line. And this team threw 3 incomplete passes, and it was 4th down, and if they stopped them there, they would win the game. What happened was Bob Oliver went by all of the offensive linemen and trapped the quarterback and slammed it to the ground, and that would have won the ball game, except for a yellow flag that went up. And the referees penalized him for roughing the quarterback. The other team got a 15-yard, and they went down and scored. So they tied the game instead of Bob's team winning the game. And he felt responsible for that. He blamed himself for that. And his enthusiasm really tanked. And you could see it in him. The coaches almost lost confidence in him. He was kind of known as not having all, not really putting out. And I went down one day to watch the practice, and Bob came off the field and walked by me. And I grabbed him by the shoulder pad, and I whacked him on the rear end, and I said, "Bob, tell me the secret to your greatness." Just kidding. And then I felt guilty because that sounded hypocritical. And he turned around and looked at me, and he thought for a moment, and he said, "Well, I've never thought about it, but I am pretty quick, and I can read the offense very, very well." And he began to tell me the secret to his greatness. And I'm standing there dumbfounded. It just so happens, as he went back on the field for practice, he was a different Bob Oliver. He was all over the offensive team. They had a game that weekend, and the Cleveland Browns were interested in a running back on the team that they were playing. And so they sent scouts down, they got the film, they got back to Cleveland, and that game, Bob Oliver had the game of his career. He was in the opponent's backfield more than their quarterback was. And it was amazing, the growth of this young man. A couple weeks later, when I got to the class, Bob was waiting for me. He said, "You wouldn't believe, I got a call from Blanton Collier, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And he said that they can't draft me very close to the front, but they definitely want me to come and try out." Well, they did draft him in the 17th round. I didn't know they had that many rounds back then. And he told me, he said, "I've never even dawned on me that I'd have an opportunity like this." And he said, "Would you help me?" I said, "Any way I can." So we sat down, and I had brought a poster board down, and I'd cut out a picture of Bill Glass, who was his predecessor at the Cleveland Browns, who was all-pro defensive end. And we pasted this picture on his poster board and wrote words on it. He said goals and everything we said goals then. And we began to talk about these things. Fast forward, the next spring, he goes to Cleveland, and in the end of the summer, I get a letter from him. And I lost the letter, but I had the good sense to put it in one of the books that I've written. And let me read to you the letter that Bob wrote me. He said, "Dear Mr. Willingham, I have made the top 40 players of the Cleveland Browns. I would like to thank you for helping me accomplish this goal. If you remember, my goals were a 5 flat 40 and to weigh 255 pounds. Not big for a lineman back then. Well, I weighed in at 257 and ran a 5 flat 40. I dreamed many times before I came to camp of playing the great game and never being blocked. I came into camp with the attitude that no one would out-hustle me and that I would learn my position quicker than anyone else on the team. I never had this attitude before. I think your course helped me gain the self-confidence I needed." And then he said, "It may sound conceited, but I know that I'm one of the best rookie linemen in the league today, and with my attitude, I may be the best at the end of the year. I want to thank you again for helping me accomplish my goal. Sincerely, Bob Oliver." What is it that happened to Bob Oliver? Let's go back, and I want you to trace with me the thoughts that had some changes in him, and how those changes created maybe new brain patterns in him, how he had more, his emotions changed, and so on and so on. It's been my experience that there's magic at the right time of telling people what we see in them, the strengths that we see in them. All of you know that. But what I found in our courses, especially with that team, with those teams, was that we had to go past the third or fourth week. It was where the bonding took place, and the connections took place, and the emotional togetherness melted or merged together. And then we begin to see crazy things happen to people. We begin to see them to picture new futures. We begin to see them write new goals. And we've had all kinds of people in our courses in many languages. And the same thing happens to everyone. So if there is a lesson in this, and I hope there was or is, the lesson is that once we can show that we love our pupils, our students, when we can show that, we train our facilitators to give unconditional acceptance to people. And when they demonstrate that, we see people change. And when they change, they begin to think different thoughts that elicit different emotions, that elicit different behaviors, that create new qualities of life. It's exciting. Congratulations to each one of you for doing that. Thank you.
To Ron Willingham, who's given me unconditional acceptance from the day he met me, and that's changed my life. Thank you, Ron.